about your favorite game, what do you think about most? Do you think of a sport like basketball or football? Or do you think of a board game like Monopoly? Even a fun playground game like Hopscotch or Foursquare? For me, my favorite game dates back to 600 AD, a game where people test their minds and their problem-solving skills against one another to determine a true winner. That game I'm talking about is no other than chess. Did you know that according to some studies that only 8% of people in the world know how to play chess? For a game that requires so much problem-solving skills and intelligence, shouldn't that number be higher? Today, I hope to increase that number and instruct you how to play chess. Just a disclaimer, there are no safety concerns for this, except maybe a headache. Anyways, so the basic rules of the game, you have your chessboard, and it is an 8x8 across with 64 total squares. And there are 32 total pieces, with 16 to each player, with 6 unique different pieces. You have your pawn, your knight, your bishop, your rook, your queen, and lastly, your king. All these pieces are individual in their own ways, and are separate from one another. And the main objective of chess is to take another person's piece in order to win. And you win the game by capturing the other player's king. Since the king has so much value, that's the reason. Okay? And there is a point system, but there is no scoreboard. So the points are only there to give value to pieces. So a pawn is worth 1 point since it doesn't do much. A knight and a bishop, they are both worth 3 points. A rook, that is worth 5 points. A queen is worth 9, and there is no real definitive value for the king. Some people say that it has an infinite value since when you win, you have to take the king. So there is no real value, but people say it's infinite. So I'm going to go over each individual piece and how it functions. First off, you have your pawn. Like I said, it is worth 1 point. So it's very simple. A pawn can move, and either it can move 1 square up on the board at a time. But there are exceptions to its movements. A pawn will start here on this bottom row or on this top row right here, the second row from the end. Whenever you start, the pawn can either move 1 square off or 2 squares. This is the only time where the pawn can move 2 squares. So therefore, if you move those 2 squares, it can't move another 2. It can only move 1. The other exception is whenever a pawn attacks another piece. Say a pawn is right here, and there is another pawn right here. Wouldn't you think that this pawn could attack this pawn, or vice versa? No. See, when 2 pawns are faced against each other, they can't move. But if 2 pawns were diagonal from each other right here, this pawn right here could attack this. That is the only way a pawn can attack in chess. The next piece I'm going to go over is the bishop. As I said, the bishop is worth 3 points, and a bishop can move in diagonal directions, infinite number across the board. So if a bishop were right here in this square, it could go diagonal all the way to here, here, or here. Or back here, it could go all the way across. So as I said, worth 3 points. The knight is worth 3 points as well. But it is a little bit of a confusing piece because of its movement. A knight moves in an L shape, or best be said in technical terms, it can be said as moving 2 squares in one direction and 1 in another. So if you had your pawn, if you had your knight right here, you can move it 2 squares up and 1 to the right or 1 to the left. Or you can go to the right 2, and then up or down 1. Or down 2, to the left 1 and right 1, or to the left and up 1 and down 1. Just cover it up. A pawn, not a pawn, why is that pawn? A knight moves in an L shape. The next piece I'm going to go over is the rook. The rook is worth 5 points and is one of the more powerful pieces in chess. A rook can move in any direction, horizontal or vertical. It can't move diagonal. So if it were to start in this top corner, it could go all the way down to this board, to this point, or all the way across to this part. Whenever you start in chess, the rook will start in the very top corner and it is entrapped by 3 pieces. Therefore, it is a hard piece to be able to move. It's typically used in late game chess. Well, the second last piece I'm going to go over is the queen. The queen is worth 9 points and is often referred to as the most powerful piece in chess. Because of that, the queen can move vertical, horizontally, and diagonally. Therefore, it can move in all directions. This makes the queen very valuable to your team. If you lose your queen, you'll not likely be able to win the game just because of that value. And like I said, it can move all the way across the board. It can move all the way across here and all the way up. The last piece I'm going to go over is the king. Like I said earlier, the king is your most valuable piece, but it is not necessarily the most valuable, because the king can move, but it can only move in one direction anywhere. Right here, like this. It can move everywhere, one direction, one piece at a time. It can also capture pieces too. So, but if you were to lose your king, like I said earlier, you will lose the game, and the main goal of the game is to capture the other person's king. Now, with all that going over the pieces, I will now show you how you can properly win a game in just 2 moves. So, for this to happen, you will have to be playing as the black team or the darker colored team, as what can usually be referred to. So, whenever the white team moves, or the light colored team, they will move their kingside pawn in front of their bishop. This will give a clear opportunity for a diagonal attack on their king. Now, if you are the black team, the move you must play is you must move the pawn either 1 or 2 squares, it doesn't matter, in front of your king. Therefore, it can give your queen a clear attack here with this. Now, if your opponent doesn't catch on to what you're trying to do, and they make a bad decision, they will move that pawn right there. It doesn't really matter. Typically, they'll move that pawn, but they can move any other pawn across the board. They just can't move this one right here, that red square. Now from here, you have a clear opportunity to move your queen diagonally in that attacking position for the diagonal. As you can see, the king is vulnerable. This term, when the king is vulnerable for attack, we call that a check. If you put your opponent in check, they must be able to move their king in a way so that way it is no longer vulnerable to attack. That's one option. There's 3 options. The second one is they can move a piece in the way of a piece that's coming to attack him. The third option is that they can eliminate the piece that is threatening the king. None of that is happening here, and whenever there is no options for the king, we call that a checkmate, and that will be the deciding factor of the winning. It's a checkmate because the king can only move 1 square, and that would be here, and they would still be vulnerable for attack from the queen. The second option is moving a piece in front of it. Right here you have your bishop, and as I said earlier, bishops can move diagonally, so it can move either here or here, and then the king is still vulnerable. This piece right here is the knight, and like I said earlier, it can only move in an L shape, but only 2 squares. See, it could only go here, here, and here, and that still leaves the king vulnerable. Or it can go up to the left one, and that still leaves the king vulnerable. And you also have your pawns over here. Like I said, the pawn can move up 2 squares, but it can't capture when it moves up forward. And the last option to save the checkmate, is to eliminate the queen that is threatening the king. Now, as you see, the queen is right here. You can't move any piece in the way that we're going to attack. The kings, they can move diagonally, but only 1 square. So the king can't eliminate it. That pawn right there can't eliminate that queen because it is not attacking diagonally. These pawns right here, they are next to it, but they aren't able to go horizontally to attack that that queen. So therefore, all those options are limited, and you will be able to see that the queen will be able to go down here, eliminate the king for a check. That's all I have for you today. So hopefully with what you've learned, I hope you can maybe beat your opponent using 2 moves, or use the other moves that I taught you with the other pieces, and hopefully you can go win a game.